In this edition of Cockpit Confessionals, I have everything from a couple of pilots that thinking they're James Bond to a pilot making a video that goes viral. And not the type of video that can go on YouTube. I'll explain it all. Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel 7-4 Gear is all about aviation. If you're new to this series, it is my only series that's on my channel that is not family friendly. So if you're a child under 18 and your parents would be mad if you watch something that was, let's say, R-rated, well then do what I did when I found out you could find boobs on the internet. Just close that window and wait till you're 18. Liar! If you have a story that would be good for Cockpit Confessionals, send it to my Instagram. Eventually I'm gonna run out of stories, despite what all my ex-girlfriends say. Alright, let's get into it. There was a pilot at this regional airline, and we'll just call him Mike. Now, Mike had worked at this airline for several years. He'd worked himself into a position of management, and he had a knack for irritating people in the way that he talked and acted towards them. I've told you in some of my videos how small the aviation community is, so it makes a lot of sense to be nice to people, regardless of whether you're senior to them or junior to them or at another airline. It behooves you to be nice to the people around you just in general, but especially in a tiny community like the airlines. And the reason this is relevant is because if Mike was a nicer guy, this story probably wouldn't be so funny. This is going to seem like a weird fact, but it's relevant to the story. In the US, there are some carriers that are known for having a higher percentage of gay pilots. And this regional airline is one of those airlines that's known for having a higher percentage of gay pilots. I have several friends at that airline, and I only actually have one friend that I know there that's gay. Shout out to my boy Brett. But the reality is the ratio seemed pretty normal to me as compared to any other regional airline or any other airline for that matter. But here is why it's relevant to the story. You may remember from a previous Cockpit Confessionals where a pilot on a layover ended up in a massage parlor and got his banana peeled. Well, Mike, in his infinite wisdom, decided to peel his own banana and post it on the internet. And if that wasn't smart enough, apparently he used some type of hashtags like #pilot, #pilotlife, or something like that in order for a bunch of the gay pilots that were at this same airline to find it on their page. So they found it, and they shared it, and so did everybody else. And I think within about 3 days, everybody at this airline knew who this guy was. Moral of the story is, be nice to the people that you work with, and don't have to post stuff online so you get attention from other people. That's just ridiculous. Most of you have seen that the hotels that I stay at around the world are generally pretty nice. And that's true for just about everywhere we go in the world. There are a few cities in random places where the hotels aren't that great, but I would say 98% of the hotels we stay at are pretty good. One of the best things about having a nice hotel is obviously the view or the amenities. You might have a pool, a nice gym, things like that. All those things are part of having a nice hotel. And that leads us into this next story. I've told you about layovers when I'm doing passenger flying where I have a bunch of flight attendants that usually there's a couple that you'll go out and do something with. You go have some drinks, you might go to the pool, depending on where you're at and what's going on, you may do different things. In this story, the flight attendant made something called crew juice, and if you haven't seen the videos where I talk about crew juice, it's basically a bunch of leftover alcohol that gets mixed together and put into a bottle, and then the crews will drink it in the van or on the layover. Well, this flight attendant made a bunch of crew juice because she thought everybody was going to be going out that night and doing some things. But they ended up getting to the hotel and nobody wanted to go out, so her and one of the pilots went up to the hot tub just to hang out, and she brought the crew juice. This hotel had a really cool rooftop pool and jacuzzi. It had one of those affinity pools where it goes off the side and you have a great view of the city, and the same thing with the jacuzzi. It had this great view of the city. Since nobody else wanted to go out, the flight attendant and the pilot went up and hung out in the jacuzzi, and they ended up drinking crew juice all night. I've told you several times in videos it's not very common for pilots and flight attendants to hook up, but it does happen. Maybe more times when crew juice is involved, but it does happen from time to time. And so while they're drinking, before long, they started to bow chicka down down. And here's the thing, you're up on a rooftop pool, you're at the side of the hotel, you're a long way from the entrance. I mean, who's gonna see you up there? Next day, the crew goes down and gets breakfast. So rule number one for me, for any crew member, is you always get the free breakfast. Even if you have to shorten your sleep, you always go get the free breakfast. So they go down there and they get the free breakfast. And they're trying to play it all nonchalant, like no big deal, nothing happened, because hey, at the end of the day, you still have to do a couple more flights together, so you want to keep things professional. Now, generally, crews will always sit together. Even if they're at an airport or wherever they go, they'll usually all sit together and talk and whatever. So these guys are all sitting down having breakfast together, and a couple people just started throwing out these little snippets like, hey, how was the jacuzzi last night? Hey, how was everything last night? And they thought it was a little bit weird, but they were obviously feeling a little bit guilty, so they didn't want us to talk about it. So they were like, yeah, whatever. We stayed up there for an hour or so, and then we left. Like I talked about in the earlier video, rumors spread fast inside crews. It's a little bit like high school sometimes. They finished breakfast, they went up to their rooms, they changed, they got ready, they went down to the lobby, and usually the flight crews will meet in the lobby before they head out to the plane. So they're hanging out in the lobby, they check in their card, and the pilot turns around, looks up on the wall of the lobby, and sees a massive TV with a view of the city from the roof of the hotel. And of course, what else is in that view? The hot tub. So apparently one of the crew members went down to get something, saw them going at it, and nobody in the hotel lobby seemed to notice what was going on. So of course, that flight attendant proceeded to text everybody else in the crew. The temperature control in the upper deck of a 747 is pretty good. But if you've ever lived with somebody, you know sometimes it's hard to figure out what temperature to set, especially when you want to go to sleep. There was this captain, and he was a pretty big guy, and he was from Texas, so he was a Texas-sized man, so we'll just call him Tex. Well, Tex went back to rest, and he was going back to rest with another first officer. You see, in the bunk area, you're going to have two beds, and they're kind of in separate rooms, but they're close together, and they share the same air conditioning. So if it's hot on one side, it's going to be hot on the other side. And he asked the first officer, hey, set the temperature for whatever you want. Well, the thing is that Tex is a pretty big guy. So unless you set the temperature very, very cold, he would sleep naked in the bunk. Anyways, it's a little bit gross, but hey, you're never going to end up seeing it because you're going to end up walking out the door and not seeing what's behind the curtain, so it's not a huge deal. But Tex was an older guy, and like some older men, he would get up often to go to the bathroom. And of course, when Tex would get up in the middle of the night to go pee, as most old men do, he would always put on his shoes because he's not disgusting. So he'd put on his shoes, which were cowboy boots, and he'd put his cowboy boots on and go to the bathroom. And he'd usually go out and check up on the flight deck and see how everything is going, which is typically something captains will do, especially on freighters, because you don't need to access the flight deck. It's all just open. There's just a curtain up there. So he walked up there to check and see what the crew was doing. The problem is that Tex doesn't like wearing clothes when he's sleeping, so all he was wearing was cowboy boots. So of course, if you're sitting down and there's a guy standing up right behind you at eye level, you can imagine what you see when he turns around and asks, hey guys, how's it going up here? Puts a whole new meaning to the word cockpit. Since we're on the topic of naked crew members, we should probably talk about taking sleeping pills during a layover. I've often been asked by people, how do I handle the jet lag since I'm flying around the world? And a lot of people have commented and asked in a different form by saying, hey, you look extremely tired, you should really go get some sleep instead of making videos. And unfortunately, this is what my rested face looks like. But one thing that I never do is I never take sleeping pills. And I know some pilots that will take different types of things that are herbal to help them sleep. I personally don't do it just because I don't want to get addicted to it. I don't want to take it and think, oh my gosh, that's the best sleep I've ever had and I want more of that. So I don't do it. I try to do other things and get into a different routine to help me go to sleep. But in this case, one of the flight attendants was on a layover and he thought it would be a great idea to take a sleeping pill so he could get a great night's sleep. We're going to call this flight attendant George. Well, George took his sleeping pill, and the problem is that if you don't know how you're reacting when you're taking sleeping pills, one of the side effects is sleepwalking. So they say if you're going to take sleeping pills, do it at home or when you're around some other people, so that way if you end up sleepwalking, you don't do things like walking out your house and things like that, which happens from time to time. But if you're on a layover in a hotel, You don't walk out of your house, you walk into a hallway. Well, George ended up taking the sleeping pill, not knowing, thinking it'd be a great idea, and he was going to get a great night's sleep, trying to be a good, well-rested crew member. He took these sleeping pills. Well, in the middle of the night, George got up and was wandering around the floor of the hotel totally naked. Went and got ice, apparently was just walking up and down the halls and pretending to be talking to someone. Somebody called security. Security had to get him, and then the security guy had actually recognized him as the flight crew member. Eventually, one of the crew members got called. They figured out who it was. They had to let him back into his room. They realized what was going on, that he wasn't drunk, but they didn't know exactly what was happening. Once they realized he had taken the sleeping pills, though, they got him into his room, they get him into bed, and that was it. Well, George wakes up the next day, none the wiser. He thinks it was a totally great, restful sleep. Gets down, and he's meeting the crew, of course, in the lobby getting ready to go to work. The crew member that got called was the captain, and the captain, being a good captain, basically pulled him aside and privately told him what was happening. The problem is that management ended up finding out about what this flight attendant had done. He got flown out to the headquarters and had to do the pee-pee dance. And the pee-pee dance is basically when you stand on the carpet in front of your boss and you dance around and hope to not get fired. Moral of this story is, make sure you take a sleeping pill at home before you do it on the road and then end up running around the hallways naked of a hotel.
We're good, streaky! Yes!
When I started YouTube, I started seeing these videos that were 8 and 10, 12 minutes long, and I thought to myself, this will take me like an hour to make a 10-minute long video. No big deal. I'll be able to make the video and go out. Not a problem. Reality is, this takes up a lot of my free time, and it sometimes causes me to miss fun things on layovers. But this story is one that I'm really glad that I missed. I operated into the city with 2 other pilots. It was a pretty short day, so everybody was well rested, and we got into this layover. It was Friday night. They wanted to go out. They wanted to drink. I had some video editing to do because I posted up my video on Sunday. I had some video editing to do, so I was like, guys, I really can't. And it's a city that I'd gone out in a bunch of different times, so I knew it was going to be the same thing and nothing new. 2 days later in the morning, we meet up in the van to get ready to go to work, and we're in the van, and I noticed both of them were kind of quiet. And on the way in, everybody was joking and having kind of a good rapport, so I thought it was kind of surprising that these 2 guys were so quiet. Well, on this van ride in, I started asking, like, where did you guys go? What did you do? What did you guys get into on Friday night? All this stuff. And they seemed kind of not wanting to talk about it, which, if you know me, then that makes me even more curious to really start digging and find out the story. And it turned out to be a very funny story, for me, not them. They ended up going out and getting some drinks and getting a little bit sauced up. And on the way back to the hotel, they ended up running into a couple of girls that were there and well dressed. And these girls started talking to them and asking about where they're from and what they were doing. And of course, like all pilots tend to do, they started saying, oh, we're airline pilots and this and that and the other thing. Of course, these girls are like,
oh, that's so impressive.
and these guys are thinking, we are the James Bond of the skies. We're feeling so cool.
Name's Bond. James Bond.
So since it's like 2 or 3 in the morning, they're talking to these girls. They're like, hey, you should come back to our hotel. We have some more drinks over there. We can hang out. And the girls are like, oh, that's great. Where's your hotel? Let's go do that. And they started saying what neighborhood their hotel was in, which was like a 20-minute walk. And the girls were like, oh, but we're in these really high heels. It'll be a long walk. No, that's fine. You know, we can take a cab and we'll see if we can get a cab. And then one of the girls said, no, I got a better idea. I live right over here. Let's just go to my house. I live 1 block away. We can just go to my house and have drinks there. So these pilots are like, they thought, okay, cool, we'll go to their house and then we're going to see what's going to happen. Of course, we know what they wanted to have happen. They get over to this girl's house, they walk into the room and they sit there in the living room and the girls are like, hey, we're going to go get you a drink. What do you want? The girls walk into the kitchen and get some drinks, and about 10 seconds later, 2 massive dudes walk out of the kitchen. So this guy that looks like The Rock and his twin brother walk out of the room and they stand in front of these guys who are no bigger than I am, and they say, look, we're not going to hurt you, but you're going to give us all of your money, all of your watches, your cell phones, you're going to give us everything. And the pilots looked at each other and like, okay, they didn't even put up a fight. They just gave them everything. And then the guys walked them out of the front side of this really nice apartment building that this girl was living in. They walked them out there and said,
don't ever come back here again.
So they just walked back to the hotel, and that was it. Regardless of what you think, You're probably not James Bond, but even if you are, you can't defy the laws of physics of aviation. If you've never seen my Hollywood versus reality on James Bond defying the laws of physics in aviation, I'll put a link to it right here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.